I'll start with the official welcome to Thoughts on Talks, Deep Dives and Digressions, another Black Lives Matter episode. And we have our friend Salam Thompson joining us, Reverend Michael McMorrow, the Rev from the Center for Spiritual Living in Granada Hills, and myself, Milena Don, who just likes to boss guys around.
She's good at it.
Well, thank you. And so, Salam, are you centered both visually and spiritually?
Like leaning back and stuff like that. So I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. So we want to know what your experience was that brought us together for this special episode. And then we're going to ask all the questions that we think anybody might ask.
Okay? Sure. Well, first, I'd like to thank you all for sharing space and time with me this late afternoon. But essentially, my family and I, we were shopping in the Ralph's in Porter Ranch, nearby from here. A number of celebrities go in there, from time to time, quite more often than not, I should say. And long story short, we were in the self-checkout line, and there were no bags present, in the line. We had a cart full of things. So I walked over, I got a bundle of bags. So as we scan items, we could just toss things right into the bag. And
so did you grab them from like another self-checkout counter? Or did you go?
They were at the front. There were no bags whatsoever at any self-checkout stand.
Okay.
But the bag stations were there where you put the bags on.
Yeah, those holder things.
Correct. Yes. So we went and grabbed bags, and then as we scanned items, we put them in the bag. We had a cart full of stuff, so our cart was full, and in line with how COVID, was operating, as soon as you walk into this store, there's always a courtesy clerk there that's cleaning the carts with their spray and their paper towel before sanitizing them before they let the shoppers get them before they go in. So keep that in mind as a reason why we're scanning things and putting them in the bag right away, because with a cart full of things and you only have so big of a
it's a small counter.
Yeah, you can't fit a whole lot there. So so there's, as we were filling up the bags, we were maybe about a third of the way through our groceries, and I'm facing the checkout stand while I'm scanning, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw something go like that. And
you were with your wife, right?
Correct.
So she was there, and you two were doing like assembly line checking.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And so as I saw that dart past me, and there's a big aisle behind me that my back is to, right before you go into the bakery section of that store. And there's a little podium or rostrum or whatever where a person in charge, I guess, or customer service supervisor stands. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw him dart by like that. So, and then a few moments after I scanned a couple of things, I looked this way. He comes around here. And we're standing here, and he goes, "Hey, did you pay for those bags?" And his hand goes to reach into the shopping cart. And every place that I've gone to, and generally speaking, when you're in the self-checkout line, it doesn't inquire about bags until you finish scanning, right?
Right.
So for him to walk up, with the cart, was 2/3 of the way full. Now, we were scanning away, and we weren't even close to finish. And for him to inquire that question and to reach into our cart was fairly premature in the most innocuous sense, but gravely offensive in the worst case, especially as the dialogue went on. And so I told him, well, when we're done scanning, like that, and then we stopped, and it dawned on us, I said, wait a minute, there's people over here, there's people up there, there's people, behind us. You walked over to inquire if we paid for our bags while we're in the midst of scanning. Okay. And so I asked, why did you inquire that? Why are you asking? Are you assuming that we're stealing the bags or something? And we said we feel that we're being racially profiled. Please get your manager. And we were standing in his way, and he said, "I will if you will please let me," as if we were somehow impeding his progress when he came into our space. So we stepped to the side. The manager comes over.
Now, at this point, did other people notice what was happening? And were the other people also partially through? And were they of different races?
They were different races. So I think
Okay.
we were the only ink spots that were there.
Okay.
There were, I noticed that peripherally people stopped what they were doing and look, to see
Okay.
like what was going on.
What was
And,
the commotion?
yes. And
Okay.
so the manager comes over, I believe his name is Tim, and he said, what seems to be the problem? And I explained to him that this gentleman here just racially profiled us and accused us of stealing grocery bags when we weren't even finished scanning. And I thought that was preposterous. First, he explains he white-splained it as if to say, well, I don't think it was racist. And then I said, well, you're entitled to your opinion, and you're also entitled to know the difference between you and I. So what may be of no offense to you, it's of grave offense to me. And this is what the gentleman did based on what I look like, not necessarily what you look like. So there's not a question of what you think is racist, or you surmising in your lens what you think my feeling is. It's about hearing what my customer experience is. This is pretty much the first time that the customer is always right. Didn't cut the mustard at this time. It wasn't, well, I apologize for that. He apologized after the white-splaining. Okay. He apologized. And then I asked him, then he goes to white-splain further by saying that the reason why he inquired about the bags is because the Department of Health was cracking down on them about the bags. I said, really, the Department of Health? I said, do you mind sharing with me what was the statute that that they're citing and referencing when they're cracking the whip on you guys? And so he couldn't explain or answer that question. And I said, because it's interesting that you say the Department of Health, because he asked me in between, is there a reason why you're scanning them and putting your groceries in the bag? And the surface area is only so big, probably like 2 by 3 or something.
Where else are you supposed to put them? They'll fall all over the ground.
Right. And so and so the idea is like, are you suggesting that we should put our groceries on the floor or something like that? That's not happening, because that would fly in the face of that courtesy clerk whom you're paying money to clean and sanitize carts outside.
But those holders aren't they just there to hold the bags open so you can bag, you scan and bag, you scan and bag, just like the checkers do.
And to be honest, and to be honest, we didn't. When I got the bags, we didn't put them on the holder. I don't have. That's not what they pay me for. I'm not paying.
Right. That's an extra step.
Yeah. So that's too much. I only got the essential, pertinent things of what I needed, to make that and to go forward. Reverend Mike, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say, the way these stations work is you have to keep all the items on that scale, because that's how they determine whether or not you are paying for them or not, or whether they're all accounted for. So this whole explanation doesn't add up, and it smells.
And so when he proceeded to try to white-splain, what Department of Health supposedly said, and I kind of like drew a dotted line to how the fellow outside was cleaning the carts, because he was framing the conversation as if, well, why are you scanning the items and putting them directly in the bag? Well, it's the same cleanliness that I'm upholding our family to, is the same cleanliness that courtesy clerk who you're paying, I don't know what you're paying them, but when you come into the store, he's sanitizing your basket to give to you. That's the same consistency.
Well, and everyone else is using the same technique.
Yeah.
Scanning, putting items in the bag, scanning.
And the interesting thing is, one of the groups of people who were standing behind us, they had their own canvas bag, and they were scanning items and putting them in the bag, scanning items and putting them in the bag. There are some establishments that when you're shopping, they don't even allow you to put items that you're shopping for into the bag until you get to the register. But neither of those were the case here. Yeah, and
but it wasn't about scanning items anyway.
No, it clearly wasn't.
It was about the manager then doubling down on what the cashier. First, the cashier mishandles it and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead and finish."
Right.
That's how he's going to handle that.
Did he say that? I didn't hear that part of the
the initial fellow who came over did not do any type of
he was the first one to challenge you on what you were doing with the bags.
Yes, there was no concession on his part to say, go ahead and finish what you're doing. And then even if at the very worst case, which is even borderline, I want to verify or something like that, because then you're singling out, right? Like you were already. So to come forth and have the manager come up and say, well, this is like a customer service. He was going on the lines of customer service.
Was the first guy standing there with the manager? Was it two of them facing two of you?
Initially it was, and then that first guy went over and kind of like cast his gaze onto us as we were talking, from afar. And so as I explained to the manager, like this is a cascading effect. What should have been something simple as a customer service training issue now escalated to a racial profiling issue. And now it goes from a racial profiling issue to a complete smear of my character and a complete banishment. And blacklisting.
Okay, but that didn't happen while you were standing there, though,
no,
right?
That did not.
So
but
how did that
cascade?
Right. So from the point of like you're standing there, the manager's there, you and your wife are there. How did that incident close? How did you get the rest of your groceries and leave? Was there yelling? Did he apologize and say, please? Okay.
It was even tone. There was no yelling whatsoever. In fact, I even went further to kind of make suggestions to him how this training issue could, go a little bit differently. To which he agreed.
Doesn't surprise me at all, because I know you, and you are all about connecting and helping people learn about interacting. So I totally can picture that.
We did ask him for the corporate number. So we were adamant about that. His initial pushback to us was, well, you can call them, but eventually your conversation, you're going to end up having to talk back to me again. Basically like saying it's a circular kind of a deal. And when we said, that's okay. We would like your corporate number anyway. And so he stepped away and for a while and went to get the corporate number. He gave us the number on the card or whatever.
And was it like a Los Angeles number, or was it?
It was a 310 area code. 310. Yeah, so it was to Ralph's corporate office, not necessarily his parent company, Kroger, right?
Okay.
And while we were waiting for him to come back, we were contemplating on, since we're not even finished scanning our groceries, just dropping everything and just leaving because of how gravely offended we were. And we said, well, they have items here that we typically need. We know that, we don't want to pretty much self-create an environment where we're imposing on ourselves a food desert and voluntarily. We're trying to, get groceries at the end of the day. It's not like going to go to a fashion mall. These are staple goods that you're trying to get for your family.
Well, and you've already spent the time selecting them, putting them in the cart. Once they're in the cart, I feel like they're mine. So to have anybody reach into my cart, I already feel is an invasion, and I want to slap their hand and say, "What are you doing? That's my stuff." Yeah.
And see, now if I reacted in even remotely close to that, then right away I'd be at fault right off the bat.
Right.
Because there's always a presumption of guilt that's placed on, Black people in this situation. And especially if you're as tall as I am, and as large as I am, and my voice is booming with bass, these are frightening, threatening things in these white spaces. And so when I had all these eyes looking at me, they were basically pretty much saying, oh, there goes the neighborhood, like we're wondering if I was a ticking time bomb ready to go off. But we handled the conversation cordially. And then when we left the store, we went into the parking lot and dialed that 310 number to the corporate office right away. And so that number that we called was at the corporate. They said, okay, you need to contact like customer relations or something to that effect through Kroger. And Kroger, of course, is Ralph's parent company. And so we got that number from that person after a 20-minute conversation or so, came home, and we had gotten the information we needed. We called that number and left a message. No, the lady who we talked to at the 310 number passed on our information, and we left a message with the number that lady gave us. Neither party had contacted us whatsoever. We've heard.
And did you get did you write down the names of the people you spoke to and all of that kind of tracking? Which is
we did. We have notes, a notepad of copious notes of all of that, and so
this all happened in May, right? So it was months ago now, as we're in September now.
Correct.
And so you spoke to the manager, you got the number from him. So I'm just like following the chain of like going up the ladder, going up the hierarchy.
Yes.
And so you've done everything by the book. You've gone from the employee to the manager to the local corporate office. They referred you to the national main company chain. So you're like basically at the top now, and you left a message and didn't hear back. So then the next step.
Here's the thing, Melanie.
Okay.
Our next correspondence from them was the banishment letter that I received in the mail. And
so I have that available to share. So let me bring that up on the screen, because that is crazy. Okay, I had it on the screen. All right, give me a minute to find it.
No problem. I'll say this while you're pulling it up. It's related to it. The interesting thing about that is when you're a Ralph's Club member, like we are, and you enter your phone number and you do your transaction and you print that receipt, the only thing on that receipt is the last 4 digits of your Ralph's Club number, right?
Okay.
Now, when I got the letter was titled to me, Salam Thompson. And I go by Salam Thompson, those who know me and things, but my payment methods have my government name. So they had no idea at that local store what my AKA is, right? My spiritual AKA, if you will. So for them to send a letter to me titled Salam Thompson when I haven't shared not with them tells me that surreptitiously somebody did some digging. And to find out after we left, they found out what my information was, what my address was, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah. Okay, so here's the letter. And I'm going to zoom in a little. I've redacted your address, but I left your name that you were just talking about.
Okay.
And so you left messages asking for some help with this situation.
Yes.
And their response is this. Okay, was it black and white? Because you could see this.
It was black and white like this. You notice there's no letter. The letter heading looks like faded. There's something a little off about this, because the letter was like almost like a plain envelope when we received it. But
was it hand addressed?
I'm sorry?
Was it hand addressed? Was it typed?
It was typed just like you see it.
Okay.
Yeah, right where you redact it.
Okay. So a form letter that is not on official corporate letterhead, because if I'm looking for something official, I'm looking for something full color with a person's name and a signature, and all of the official things saying it was CC'd to legal or whatever like this.
Yes.
But this is let me zoom in so that people at home can see the actual body of the letter. Ralph's has received a complaint. So somebody was complaining about you, not your complaint received by them. Ralph's has received a complaint regarding inappropriate, threatening, and demeaning behavior on your part towards employees of the above referenced Ralph's store. Based on the concerns reported, Ralph's is legally responsible to protect its employees from this type of treatment. As a result of your behavior, it is with disappointment we inform you that you, including household and those accompanied, are hereby prohibited from entering all Ralph's and Food for Less stores and from having contact via phone or email with all Ralph's and Food for Less stores and employees. So that means that they're telling you you're not allowed to follow up. We hope that you'll honor this demand. If you return, you will be committing criminal and civil trespass, and Ralph's will not hesitate to take all legal action, including criminal prosecution and seeking injunctive relief and all legal costs associated with these remedies. Sincerely, Ralph's grocery stores. So,
and there's no civil code that was cited. There's no civil code cited. There's no municipal code cited. There's no signature there.
And this doesn't have your Ralph's number or anything.
It doesn't have any reference to me whatsoever regarding club member anything. So
okay, so right now after reading that, I'm like furious. I feel like blood boiling, and I'm like, what the actual hell is going on here? Because like you said, it's very suspicious.
Yes.
That it doesn't look really official and that it's very vague and a form letter, and yet they're threatening you and your whole family that you'll be arrested if you show up in any of their stores. And that means like nationwide, I'm assuming, even though it's the Los Angeles address on it.
Yes.
So
and at that point we call Kroger,
if I can add,
corporate office. Go ahead, Reverend.
And no one has taken responsibility to answer any letters, to address what happened, why he was right. So it's just it's the thing that makes me absolutely crazy about the corporate structure, where no one is responsible for anything.
Yes.
But the customer bears the burden of all of this jive, and that's what this is. If this wasn't a case of racial profiling, I don't know what is. And in this day and age, with everything that's come down in the last year and a half, for Ralph's to do this, and not only to disrespect him and his wife in the store in front of all of those people, but to have no remedy.
Right.
No remedy.
Okay. So let me dial it back.
The only thing that you can do, and I'm going on a rant here.
I know, I'm trying to pull you back.
Is to spend tens of thousands of dollars with a lawyer to seek a remedy for this. It's not right.
Okay. It isn't right. And it's wrong on so many levels. And this is new information. This is dated May 25th. Again, this is September. I think Reverend Mike sent it to me within the last week. So this is all new, and I'm feeling it for the first time, whereas you've been dealing with it for months, Salam, and your family. Yes. And Reverend Mike, he wrote a letter on your behalf in July, which we'll get to in a minute. But so this letter, what occurred to me was this is some employee who has access to Xeroxed form letters, who has sent you this in a cowardly way with no name, no identification, saying never follow up or you're going to be arrested. This is a Karen, whether it's a man or a woman. This is somebody using their whatever slight connection to some sort of power, whether it's corporate power or whatever, to put you in your place for daring to say, wait a minute, That's all you did is say, wait a minute, why is all of this happening? It was ridiculous in the first place to stop somebody shopping, putting things in what they were giving out for free during the pandemic. At least a lot of stores were.
Yes.
To accuse you of stealing that, not the groceries, which are higher value, not, the cash register. They've created self-checkout because there's supposedly a level of trust with the customers.
Yes.
So to any of that, reaching in the cart, like there's so many levels of it. But this, I'm thinking, as Ralph's Kroger's, what are they going to do about an employee that sends a letter like this and makes their corporation look bad? Because Reverend Mike, you were going off at the whole corporation. What if the corporation doesn't know that some little person has done this and then put their company?
Because I'm sorry.
Has corporate received this information? Because I sent it to them.
Right.
And Salam sent a response and a lawyer wrote a letter. So to say they don't know is not.
They know now, but initially. So now they're probably circling wagons and trying to decide, what next step, if they need to take a next step. And if it's one person, one family, they probably feel like they've quashed it. But now it is Reverend Mike has stepped up as the leader of a spiritual community. And now we're talking about it on this platform, which, I'm thinking we share with social media. And I have this whole list of things that I've either already done or, want to do after talking to you. So, this first letter is infuriating and several levels of wrong. So when you got this, you sent a letter that I think I have here too, saying it's to the CEO of Kroger, right?
Correct. Rodney
and
Melena, can I cut in for just a second here?
Yes.
I think the other thing that annoys me, because what Salam did was he gave a timeline of how everything came down. So he's kind of gone over that. But what Salam did in that exchange with the manager was basically give him an out, right? He said, look, this is a training thing. It can be solved easily, blah, 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 right? So they had an easy out, saying corporate, but they took an even easier out, which is to let's just ignore the whole thing and threaten them with lawyers.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no integrity here, even just man to man between the manager and Salam.
The interesting thing is when the employee response and the corporate response to me pointing out of racism is for you to enforce your racism,
Yeah, and so over the top. We're talking about plastic bags that cost a few cents,
right?
And a rude employee. So you say customer's always right. Rude employee, here's what how you handle this. We are very sorry for your experience. Please accept our apology, and you and your family are welcome here. And if you would like to train us, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever could follow from that. There are so many possibilities, as Reverend Mike pointed out at some point in one of his letters. But they just kept digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's now crazy. Somebody is a family are banned for life from supermarkets because of supposedly plastic bags or even skin color. So both those are totally crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you wrote, I have May 28th, you wrote a letter to the CEO of Kroger and CC'd it to the head of media relations and corporate communications. So this is important that she know that their letterhead is being used like this. And I can show, I can show this, the top at least of the letter. that you start off very peacefully. The wording is not combative. I would like to relay an issue that's occurred at our local Ralph's store. And then you went on to describe the situation. And so here again is another opportunity for them to say, thank you for letting us know about this.
Mm-hmm.
This is something we care about deeply. We would like to do everything we can to remedy it. And, hope that you would share this with your friends so everybody knows that it's all resolved, because this should be a public relations issue. It is a public relations issue.
Very much so.
And so you end it with, I'm writing to you with the hopes that you will make the situation right for myself and my family who've been long-term loyal Ralph's customers. And then I hope I won't be forced to explore legal counsel regarding this matter, nor discuss this incident with various media outlets, which is, I would say, exactly the right way to end it. Like, I'm trying to resolve it now, but those are the next steps if I don't hear back from you.
Mm-hmm.
So that was May 28th. Did you hear anything after that?
Not a solitary word.
But
did you not have a lawyer write them a letter also?
We did. In fact, we did.
Okay.
And he sent the letter over to them, and in our interaction, I had to outline for him a timeline of what happened and what was said, and he put together his letter with his letterhead, and sent it over to them and gave them a deadline of July 30th to respond in kind to this letter. It was therein within that letter was asking for a lifting of the ban, the banishment, and he even was trying to give, even on a more passive side, trying to initiate some sort of dialogue between the two. And honestly, what I made clear, because he mentioned to me, now we sit down with them, you could say that you were frustrated and things like that. I said, well, no. I said, because the focus is going to be on me and my supposed frustration, and not the stimulus action that occurred that evoked that would have been frustration. It wasn't frustration. It was just resistance, dialogue, and a recommendation that you take another course of action, and or some other possible solution. It didn't have to be this way that you're doing it. But there is a element of frankly, of white narcissism, that comes forth, where, like, well, who are you, N-word, to tell me I'm the store manager of this? I tell you this, We've seen this story play out in the syndicated show. It's been a syndicated show, and ever since we set feet on our shores here, 450 some odd years ago. So we've seen this before. Where we have to, where the worst of them is better and looked at with higher credibility than the best of us, and that's, it can drive you mentally insane. It really can. Yeah. Because that it runs counter to common sense. It runs counter to human decency, but still, common sense and human decency be damned. This is how it's going to go. And you just have to deal with it.
And so, like, for the typical non-Black person who goes into a supermarket and who has followed all of these steps, the expectation is, just as your expectation was, that this will be resolved. I've gone through all the right steps. I've handled this properly. It's time for you to resolve this. And they didn't. So then you had a lawyer send an opportunity for them to respond. I'm assuming you got zero response.
Yes.
Okay. So then you relate it to Reverend Mike at some point, and he wrote a letter on, and I'll share this, on church letterhead, Center for Spiritual Living Granada Hills. And he addressed it to the same first two, and then also CC'd the local union. And what is this specific union, Reverend Mike?
It's the union that represents the grocery workers at Ralph's.
Okay.
And it's the only address that I could. Wasn't able to find a direct thing, but again, because I also say in the letter that there's an opportunity here for not only stepping up their training on how to interact with people of color in the store when there's a suspicion, right?
Right.
So, I mean, let's face it, we're not everybody's angels, and there are bad actors, but Salam and Danny aren't two of them. So
no.
But the thing
and
is,
you ask for an
to
apology,
get training on how to address this. But even just the notion of all of this coming down over bags.
Yeah.
And then just a couple of weeks ago to see the CEO of Kroger talking about how their bottom line has improved because of controls over shrinkage. Well, one of the things that is part of that shrinkage is these damn bags. And shrinkage is basically the stuff that goes out the door, stolen stuff.
And the interesting thing is grocery stores, if you ever been into a grocery store, whether it be at Ralph's or Vons, on a Friday evening, Friday evening, if you're standing in line, you're seeing young people in club attire, they go either buy the alcohol or they steal it, and they make no point to stop them.
Really?
Yeah, this happens quite commonly,
Well, I know that grocery stores have in their budget a certain margin for things that are going to be lost, things that are going to walk out the door without payment. And so I would think self-checkout, they would include grocery, the cents each grocery bags, as people may not remember to pay for them, but it's in there with everything else they're scanning through. At the end, it says how many bags did you use, and it's charged there. So,
and we didn't even make it to the end of the transaction.
Yeah, which they stopped you before that.
Again, no theft, no assault on any employee, acting out and rolling on the floors and causing a commotion and things like that. I mean, but like I mentioned, the commotion was caused by an employee who was a representation of that establishment.
And if they're
on the left.
Right. And so the commotion is that you calmly pointing out that their guy is out of line.
Right.
And the boss
they started it, actually.
You calmly pointing out to the boss, hey, man, you're on the wrong side of this. Right. And then I think there's this other component, and I think rightly so. Like, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this crap anymore.
Yes.
Right. And this is
which I don't think they're used
to. You would have to be living under a rock in the last 2 years if you have not read any articles on how to be an ally to people of color, right? How our bias is affecting our relationships with each other, how our bias is affecting our perceptions of life itself, but particularly within racial relations. I mean, how could you not know? And in a corporate environment, because Salam, these guys have gone to trainings on this stuff.
Of course they did, yes.
Right? Because they spend money on this stuff. But clearly, they are not learning it. And clearly, corporate does not care.
Yet.
I agree.
So how do we get their attention? For one thing I wanted to ask is, the lawyer that you used, did he or she have a specialty? Like, what was this, a civil rights lawyer? Was this
No, I would say the short answer is no. He's not a civil rights lawyer.
Okay.
and it escaped me just now. I drew a blank as to what his area of expertise or his area of emphasis and practice would be. But the thing about it is that lawyers, even if they're not functioning in the area of expertise or practice, as they oftentimes have peers and confidants who often do. And so either there is what the form letter that he wrote to them, is, pretty much an acknowledgement, a standard, as acknowledgement, a statement of the facts, as a statement of what we found objectionable, as a statement of proposed correction, and a statement of what would be if the conclusion would be to our satisfaction. That's pretty much.
It's also formalizing it.
Yes.
It's not just between a customer and a company anymore. This has now gone to the next step, which you mentioned in your letter, that this has now legal documentation and legal ramifications.
Yes.
And they have chosen to ignore it. So part of the reason I asked that is because I reached out to my friend Scott Bowman, Dr. Scott Bowman, who's been a guest on the show before.
Oh, yes.
And he is a law professor. And so I said, here's the situation. And I asked him if he could join us tonight. He's actually at a banquet on campus. He's a professor in Texas at a university. And so he had a few suggestions, and I want to see if these had already occurred to you, or, if let's add them to the list of things that we can do.
Most certainly.
One, I suggested reaching out to the ACLU. And he said, that's a good idea, but you might want to reach out to the local NAACP chapter, especially because they might be aware of this happening either repeatedly at the same store or throughout the chain or something like that.
I'm just going to start right with the NAACP. That was a suggestion from our lawyer, and it's great that Dr. Scott brought it forward. The problem is when we looked up the LA chapter, we only saw one location, and it was in the Fox Hills Mall down. They probably have a suite or something in Culver City. And we called that number. It doesn't allow you to leave a voicemail, even though it says leave a message. It says the box is full or something. I did send in an email, and I sent them an email and got no reply whatsoever from them. And that was disappointing, to say the least. If they're manning that mailbox, if they're monitoring that mailbox,
right?
Because I know that oftentimes there are entities who may have multiple mailboxes, and some of the mailboxes or distribution groups may not necessarily be monitored. So while I was disappointed, I do have a rate.
So here's a number that's right. Okay. So here's a number that's on the screen for the president of the San Fernando Valley chapter. And he's the only he's the only one that shows up on this page, but that is most local. And so I thought,
can you put that back up? I didn't get the number.
Yes. Oh, okay.
I'm gonna call this guy myself.
Okay. Dr. James Thomas, President, San Fernando Valley chapter of the NAACP. And the number is on the screen. It's 877-245-9381. And please, only helpful calls to him for anybody who's watching this later. Of course, it's, available online, so I'm not sharing any secret information.
I didn't know that the Valley had a branch up here.
I just Googled it and thought about that. So then Dr. Scott Bowman also suggested somebody who I hadn't heard of, Ben Crump. Do you know who Ben Crump is? Okay.
He's been all over the news. I think he just represented George Floyd's family recently, and Trayvon and so forth. Yes.
Okay. So Scott says, although Ben Crump seems to be involved in other similar issues in the area, and he put a link to Beverly Hills cops sued for arresting blacks while shopping on Rodeo Drive.
That just happened recently.
Okay. Scott says, my suggestion would be to also reach out to him and the local NAACP chapter. And they're separately going to decide whether they believe it's worthwhile. However, the advantage of contacting them is that they may be aware of similar complaints in the area.
Visibility.
And then his other suggestion is to do just what we're doing. Record a conversation and share it however we can online, and, you know, gather attention and support.
Absolutely.
So I also looked up the number for our local councilman, who is John Lee. We're in Council District 12 from Granada Hills, Porter Ranch. And let me see if I wrote down his number, because that's, you know, it's a local issue that now this organization is behind it. And I know Reverend Mike also spoke to Tracy Brown, right? Now, is she regional CSL still, or is she just a well-known?
She is the former leadership chair of Centers for Spiritual Living. Yeah.
Nationally?
Yes, but she's, I mean, she's a member of the organization and serves on several committees still.
And I remember you telling me that when you spoke to her about this, she said that a similar incident, she had heard of a similar incident that happened in Texas.
Apparently,
but there was
apparently it made it in the news in the Dallas area. But in that case, there were white allies, which became the story. There were white allies around who called them out on it. And they were able to remedy the situation in real time. And, so I also sent the letter that I wrote along with Salam's timeline and the banishment letter, we've been calling it. I don't know what else to call it. Melissa Repko, who was retweeted
it was an article about
Squawk Box from CNBC, I think it was.
Yeah,
CNBC, and this is where the CEO was giving his report on how wonderful they are. Yes.
I don't know if that's showing up very well, but that's the article. And then Melissa Repko's Twitter. So
anyway, I sent it to her, but I haven't heard anything. It's frustrating to not even get, let's just say to send something to Ralph's, for instance, because we sent it to the head of media communications, right?
Yeah.
An email directly to her, a woman of color, in fact, and not even got a "Dear Reverend Mike, thanks for taking the time. You know, we feel like we've addressed this matter and the case is closed." Not even that.
Yeah.
I mean,
nothing.
Just ghosted. This is what I say. They do not care.
I mean,
and I'm encouraging anyone to never shop at Ralph's or Food for Less ever. And I'll tell you something else, because I'm stubborn about this stuff. After the Valdez incident, I've never bought gasoline from Exxon or Mobil since.
Okay.
And
so,
and just recently, I know it's a little bit humorous, but the same Ralph that's in question, more courtesy was shown to a black bear that wandered in the store, than was shown to me and my family while we were in the store.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is ridiculous.
Well, and I have to say, so I have been in a similar incident at the Ralph's off of Chatsworth. And maybe some of this is the difference between having a male cashier and a female cashier. Because I found myself in a similar situation And but the gal just came over in a very courteous way and just said, so, you know, can I help you over here? Well, yeah, you know, like, what do I do about this bag thing? Well, you know, you do this, right? Now, mind you,
That's not similar at all, Reverend Mike. What are you talking about?
What I mean is, as far as looking for the bags and all that. Now, I realize I'm an old white guy and not very threatening anymore, but
but it shouldn't be.
But Salam's not threatening either. I mean, he doesn't even carry it. It's, you know, Salam,
I mean, not to us.
Around, you know, like some guys, like some particularly younger guys, you know, they got like a, you know, a chip on
bravado
their
and
whatever,
right.
You know,
well, that's the thing. I mean,
to you know, be a knock, but you know,
he
you
was
don't
with
have
his
that
wife
vibe anymore. You know, you're just you're just a good guy. I'm here shopping with my wife, and I'm a citizen like everyone else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, a black bear got more courtesy than we did.
Well, you're apparently not as scary as a black bear. So some other ideas that I came up with along the lines of the CNBC. I know NBC locally has something called the, I think it's called the I team. That's their investigative team. And anybody can write and send tips for, like, I think this is a story and I would like you to investigate this. Yes. I heard about it because a friend of mine works in human resources, and the I team contacted her as an expert because they heard about a situation where, in this case, it was people who were falsely hiring people, taking all of their information to supposedly direct deposit pay them, and they were not real employers. They were just stealing information. So they interviewed her. So when I was asking about investigations, she told me about the iNews team, and so I have that link that we can submit tips. Okay. It is. I'll tell everybody, because maybe somebody watching would like to write in a tip. It's nbclosangeles.com/investigations/submit-tip. Or you could just go to nbclosangeles.com and look for, you know, the iNews team and submitting a tip. The other thing I thought about social media wise was, like, what if we organized a flash mob to show up at Ralph's and all do self-checkout at once, not cause any particular commotion, like not steal bags or anything, but just show up to make a statement. And we could do that however we wanted to, but to boycott quietly is not going to get their attention as much as maybe a bunch of people coming to self-checkout and then, I don't know, walking away or something like that, to show them, you know, the flip side of what they've done. It's a little bit meaner approach to it, but more of a media, maybe sensationalist approach to draw attention to the issue, because clearly, quietly and kindly
not
going through steps isn't working. Yeah.
So what would you do? You'd like get like 10 items, check them out, not pay for them, and then leave the banishment letter and walk out, and then have them clear all that out, and then the next 4 people come in and do the same thing.
And or, you know, if we wanted to be inspiring about it, because I know that's something we try to do when we remember to do it. What if we gathered a bunch of people to just stand in the middle of the store and sing "Lift Every Voice and Sing," and, you know, invite people to film it and then put that on social media, because it'll be a show of solidarity to you, your family, and any other person of color that shops in that store. That, like, every voice, all of us.
Yes.
But I mean, those are just ideas, and I think that's going to have to be another episode.
Salam,
phenomenal idea. So
Salam is one of the people who can't be in the store singing that.
Yeah, I know.
According to that letter. In fact, he can't even, you know.
Can we all take it like a sign with his head, like a little cardboard cutout of his head, and we'll all walk around? So you can't be in trouble because you're not there.
Something dignified and respectful, yes.
Yeah. I mean, of course, but like,
but that's a lot better.
You're tall, so I'd have to hold the sign up pretty high, but it would be, you know, to represent, like, okay, are you going to be mean to me because I have this sign? Or maybe we can all wear, I don't know, I don't want to do like masks and stuff because I don't want to be disrespectful, but I want to bring attention. And so that's part of it too, is like, there are so many levels to look at the cultural situation of this, and to look at, like you said, it's enough to drive you insane that you have this whole other level, this undercurrent that's coming at you in the most, you know, to go to the supermarket and shop for food in your neighborhood should not be something that you have to fight for.
Right.
And to be cut off from that is, like you said, creating a food desert situation. That the food deserts are real things in parts of Los Angeles, in any city where it's probably a redlined area where investment has been cut out from the area, and people who live there have to go to great lengths to get fresh food,
produce.
Yeah. And otherwise it's just not healthy food.
And, you know, somewhat overlapping that, but it just drove me so insane that I was even like looking up, you know, Googling what happens to people when they steal out of Walmart or when they steal out of any other like grocery store. And some places I saw,
like steal actual things.
Yeah, they had
plastic bags.
Like they had to, like, I remember seeing that some homeless folks where some stores, they're not even allowed to approach them, that allow them to just go, you know, as they're coming in and steal like a food, they're trying to survive. But there's some people will even comment and say, I had to sign a waiver with that store that I'm in agreement with being prohibited from entering the store for a fixed period of time, whether it be 2 years, 5 years, or something like that. Here, these folks are saying for life, and I came there to spend my money with them. Okay, I'm in the process of spending money with them, and you're accusing me, you know, of stealing bags while
stupidest thing ever.
1/3 of our items were out of the bag. We still had 2/3 or more to go in the shopping cart. And you're talking about bags when the damn machine doesn't even ask you about the damn bags until after you finish scanning, until after you hit pay now. Okay.
Right.
And so that's how like unintelligible and asinine this whole situation is.
Right. And it almost like, you know, I made sure to ask, did you raise your voice? Was it, you know, because I know other people would wonder, like, oh, okay, he's a tall guy. Like you said, I'm a tall guy and I have a booming voice, and it can be very intimidating, especially if people are under their implicit bias and afraid of people of color because they don't know any.
I'll concede the subjective notion that my voice was raised because my voice is so deep. And then, and you know, anytime like when you're in discussion, because you know, Black people have to be void of any thing or any emotional attribute that makes them human. They have to be void of that in any situation. We just have to be a shell of ourselves and let whites and other Dans who they've given the white supremacy playbook to have their way, you know, with us. And then if a Black woman's doing the neck roll, or as soon as the brother goes to stand up, you know, then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, you're not in place. It's almost like a Ringling Brothers kind of a circus where like they have the animals trained, and as soon as that animal steps out of line, then they smack them with the whip or hit them with the lion with the chair to keep them uniform and keep them in that box. Where we have people in general have a range of emotions that go beyond the confines of any narrow box that folks bias latent perceptions may have. And Black people aren't allowed to express any kind of emotion or any kind of disagreement or find,
and especially, I mean,
or anything.
Been absolutely justified. If that happened to me, I would feel justified raising my voice and calling everybody's attention and saying, "This is wrong. What's going on here?"
Yes.
And then for me, I would look like the hysterical female, right? So everybody kind of puts the labels on because people are uncomfortable with the show of emotion, whether it's justified or not. They begin to feel like you've lost control, you're out of control, and you might do anything if you, have, like you said, if you don't have the cool lack of emotion and act like you're a robot of some sort.
Right. But Salam
we're not allowed to display humanity. That's the bottom line. I'm sorry, Rev.
I said you didn't start it; they did.
No.
Right.
And you stayed calm, which is like, a level of Zen that most people who are not people of color probably do not have to cultivate.
No, they don't.
In the world.
And mind you, I've seen white women lose their damn mind, over
wearing a mask.
Minute things, know, in the store. And we're not talking about losing their mind over their dignity being stripped. We're talking about losing their minds over a overstep and boundary privilege being stripped. To where they say, "Oh, well, what do you mean I can't do this, that, and the other?" Well, what do you mean I can't bring my dogs in and let them crap all over the store? It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Okay, so we're at the 1 hour mark. I think we've done a good job of getting our information into packets and to having some suggestions put forth. I know Dr. Scott Bowman said that he would like to hear some follow-up of what the steps are. And so I think I'm going to call John Lee, our councilman, and if with your permission, I'll submit something to the iNews team, the NBC investigative news team. Yes. I didn't want to do it without talking to you.
Perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Of course. And another suggestion I got was to contact the mayor's office because diversity and inclusion are one of the values that Mayor Garcetti has, put forth. He put forth this big plan. So there's another angle there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then we'll have to work on this flash mob idea. Maybe we'll have to get some.
Well, while you were talking, and then I was going, okay, Mike, what's the ministerial angle?
Well, you've already, the spiritual one.
Yeah. So I'm good at the outrage. So now let's. And so I was just thinking that, we could maybe have a month-long prayer vigil in our community to raise the consciousness of Ralph's stores around diversity and inclusion, particularly in Porter Ranch.
Yes.
Mm.
And, but, I'm kind of, I'm smiling as I'm saying it, but, it's not a bad idea anyway. And it's something that we could do. Community
interfaith organization too, because as far as I'm concerned, and this is how I was like going to phrase something to when I was like writing notes, is I see Salam, I see you as an interfaith leader because you are coming on this show, you're teaching through Centers for Spiritual Living about these issues of diversity from your own personal experience. I mean, that is a major thing. And you are still following Islam. You're following your faith. and you have the Catholic school education that ties it all together so that you can, kind of interpret in a way that is understandable to many people from different backgrounds. So from that perspective, I think our local interfaith also could be invited to join us in praying for resolution of this issue.
And you walk in the ways of peace.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, you do. Yes. I think maybe that's what gets my Irish up so much on this.
Yeah, of all people.
I mean, it's always been something that has gets me riled up even as a kid. But, when somebody is just, a really good guy and a good, good husband and a good father and a good employee and a good citizen, and you know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like, well, and because we know him personally, of course.
Yes.
Yes.
But I think part of the fact that you are all of these things that we admire so much about you means that when somebody treats you that way, you say, no, I will not be treated this way. But there are probably so many people who feel enough like they deserve to be treated that way, that they've been pushed down so much that they wouldn't stand up, they wouldn't fight back. And so those are the people we need to remember. I had an incident recently where I went with my mother to the dentist, and I was in the room with her, and the dental assistant walked us in, and the woman began berating my mother in front of me. Yeah, and it was so shocking that we were both just kind of listening, and then I tried to talk the woman down a little bit because the chart that was on the screen in the office said cannot afford expensive treatments. And so this woman seemed to take it very personally and acted as if my mother specifically had repeatedly asked for free dental care and was coming in again. And the woman actually picked up my mom's dental device and was like, this is what you get. This is what you can work with. Or what else are we supposed to do? And gestured to the chart that was on the screen. And I was like, well, we just want to have the dentist evaluate and we'll go with that. We just want her to be comfortable. She deserves to be comfortable. So I wrote a letter that night and said, she's acting like this comes out of her pocket somehow. This woman is acting personally affronted. And we never said that we wouldn't pay for something. She's like, this is all we could do for you for free. She was so mean. And it was ridiculous. Again, why are people are on edge? I understand. But so I wrote to the dentist. I went on the website, wrote to the office, and I didn't hear back for a few days. So I called. But I did get to talk to the office manager and explain everything. And she apologized. And I said, my mother would like to see her chart and make sure that nothing is on there that's actually from someone else's chart, or, that there's no confusion.
Sure, yes.
And we would like to not ever have to work with that particular woman again. So we went back a week or two ago, and it's in her chart. No, the woman's name. We didn't even know the woman's name. We had just described her. But so that is an example of the expectation of if somebody has insulted me, and I realized that if my mom had asked to not pay for something, she should still not have been treated like that. You don't treat people like that because they can't pay and they need help. But because that wasn't our situation, we didn't feel oppressed or hurt or less than because of it. So we could stand up and say, wait a minute, that's not cool to treat us this way, but it's not cool to treat anybody that way.
Absolutely correct. Yes.
And so we have this opportunity.
Yes. I mean, because at the end of the day, I'm a father, of two teenagers, and a husband and things, but I reserve the right not to be treated like I'm a little boy, and this man, young man, he probably was younger than I was, coming over and asked, "Hey, did you pay for these bags?" Like I wasn't, old enough to take off my shoe and put them over my knee. That was, an insult to me. And I talked with my wife, and we had to talk often. And we said, had we not said anything, we would have still gone inside Ralph's like it was nothing. And the question is, would that be worth it? Would it be worth to go inside Ralph's and to have your dignity be as currency exchange in exchange for
carry water for some punk?
Yeah, exchange for access to something that could be taken away at a moment's notice, and your green dollar is not as green as the next person.
Right. So that's where we vote with our wallets. We invest our energy into things that are worth our time and energy and money. Yes. And so the best way in a corporate situation is to do, like Reverend Mike said, to just not shop there and to tell everybody, this place, no good, don't go there. Mm-hmm. But because it's such a huge corporate entity that's national, like you said, all that has been done so far hasn't been a blip on their radar.
Yes.
And
they can close the location and still keep their gravy train moving, to be honest.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, right before all this happened, I was on the fence about whether or not I was going to purchase shares of stock in this company. I was on the fence.
All right. Well, you're not anymore.
And then this happened.
Yeah, that was the sign.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Oh, man.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you both.
What can be done?
Yes. And if anybody has any questions, they should contact the Center for Spiritual Living Granada Hills. CSLGH.org is the website. And there's a form on the website where you can write and it will be seen. And if you have ideas or you want to volunteer to coordinate the flash mob, if you want to, if you have another song that you want to choreograph and dance through the Ralphs, we're open. We haven't quite formulated that part of the plan.
Coca-Cola, when they sang, I think in 1970, if I could teach the world to sing in perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And, if anybody has reached out on their own to city officials, state officials, anybody, lawyers, if you know a civil rights lawyer, somebody at the ACLU, anybody who wants to do anything and contribute and help out, just reach out and let us know. And we'll do what we can to try to fix this for our friend.
Nothing else, to do some prayer treatment work around the idea that the right people get this information within this structure and that it is addressed in a respectful and meaningful way.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And
thank you both for lending your allyship. I definitely appreciate it immensely.
Well, we love you, man.
Thank you for letting us, We've been talking about it for so long. What can we do? What can we do? So letting us help you with this situation gives us.
I know I'm dating myself, but it was a hair club commercial. This guy named Cy Sperling, where he said, "Not only am I a hair club president, but I'm also a client." So we spent all this time, several months, over a year now, tackling these subject matter, and here I am. Mm-hmm. I'm also a client.
Yeah. Oh, isn't the world interesting? Okay.
All right,
thanks,
kids.
Guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.